Welcome back to Carneades.org. In this video, in lieu of covering a topic in philosophy, we're going to explain why we haven't been posting videos as regularly for the last month and why I haven't been responding to comments as quickly as I might. This is also known as the political crisis in the Gambia, from someone who was there. So I live in the Gambia. Where is the Gambia? Now, the Gambia is the smallest country in mainland Africa. And that map, yes, is to scale. Named for the Gambia River, which runs the length of the country, this former British colony got its small borders, according to the urban legend, from a ship sailing up the river and shooting a cannonball off of each side. While that is probably an exaggeration of the truth, the basic idea is that the British claimed and carved out this chunk of territory in the heart of Francophone West Africa for the sake of the river and for the sake of the fertile land on either side of it. Now, despite its small size and the fact that 97% of the national budget comes directly from foreign aid, the Gambia is one of the bottom 15 countries in terms of both the Human Development Index and nominal GDP. This is due in part to the 22-year tyrannical rule of this man, His Excellency Sheikh Professor Alhaji Dr. Yahya A.J.J. Jammeh Babali Mansa. And for anyone who doesn't speak Mandinka, Babali Mansa means conqueror of rivers. Jammeh took power in a bloodless coup and claimed he would rule for 1 billion years. He said that he could cure AIDS and infertility with herbal remedies. He threatened to cut off the heads of all gay men in the Gambia. Jammeh suppressed free speech and a free press during his rule. He jailed, tortured, and killed political opponents, journalists, and citizens that criticized him in any way. He ordered police to arrest and shoot crowds of peaceful protesters, and fired Supreme Court justices that gave stays of his execution orders. Until last year, Jammeh had run every election by increasingly large margins. He would reward areas that voted for him with development initiatives and punish those that did not by cutting off power and other services. Other political parties had to pay high tariffs to register their candidates. They were only allowed to campaign during the few weeks before the election, while the ruling party could campaign all year long. The international community has long declared that the elections in the Gambia were not free and fair. Yet, it was many of these draconian measures that eventually spelled Jammeh's undoing. 6 months before the election, Ousseynou Darboe, a human rights lawyer and the leader of the main opposition party, was arrested during a peaceful protest. An increase on the tariff for registering presidential candidates and the incarceration of the main opposition candidate led all but one of the opposition candidates in the opposing parties to rally around a single coalition candidate, Adama Barrow. In the past, Jammeh had won as the opposition was divided on ethnic lines between many opposition parties, but with a single coalition candidate, that looked unlikely. However, Jammeh had still won both a majority and a plurality of the vote, so anyone else's victory looked very unlikely. In the hopes of proving that the Gambian elections were free and fair, the government devised a marble system, where voters dropped marbles into one of 3 drums representing the 3 candidates. These marbles were then counted in front of representatives of at least 2 of the parties. Jammeh was so confident that he would win, he made it impossible for anyone to cheat, including himself. In fact, these drums of marbles were watched from the polling station to the place they were counted by election observers from all of the parties, so that there was absolutely no possible way that anyone could add more marbles or take some out. Everyone was convinced that Jammeh would win, so as the election results started to be announced on local television, it was surprising that Jammeh appeared to be losing almost every district. Internet access and international calls were shut down during the entire election. Before the final districts and results were announced, the government shut off local television. The biggest surprise came when, after hours of radio silence, the Electoral Commission announced Barrow's victory, and more importantly, that Jammeh had conceded. Jammeh even called Barrow on television in a strange but somehow comic phone call. Check out the video on YouTube if you're curious. The country erupted into celebration, but after 1 week, Jammeh went back on his concession and called for new elections. He promoted new officers in the military and placed armed personnel on every corner. The international community disavowed his actions, while Jammeh appealed to the Supreme Court to get a new electoral process started. Barrow told his supporters to stay in their homes to prevent bloodshed, remembering what had happened previously when protesters marched in the streets. Over the next 2 months, Jammeh attempted to move forward by pushing his petition at the court. Meanwhile, the international community, primarily ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States, pressured Jammeh to step down. They had the blessing of the African Union and the United Nations to take whatever action was necessary. Unfortunately, neither was very successful. The court was unable to hear the case because, lo and behold, Jammeh had fired all but the Chief Justice, and the Chief Justice said, "We can't hear this case with only one person." And no matter how many heads of state visited and consulted with Jammeh, he still refused to step down. As this political dance took place and Barrow's inauguration loomed, people were leaving the country in droves, myself included. When I left, it was a ghost town here. Businesses were closed, almost everyone was gone, especially from the large city, and prices skyrocketed. Adama Barrow was inaugurated in the Gambian embassy in Dakar, Senegal, due to fears for his safety. Not long after, 7,000 ECOWAS troops stormed the tiny country from all sides. Barrow told the Gambian military that anyone who fought back would be considered a traitor. The ECOWAS troops were allowed to peacefully march to the outskirts of the capital, where they were told to stop for some last-minute negotiations. Jammeh finally stepped down and agreed to go into exile in Equatorial Guinea. He left the country, but not before looting the state coffers to the tune of $10 million, which in a tiny country like the Gambia is a lot of money. Barrow has freed political prisoners and appointed coalition members to his staff, including the newly freed Ousseynou Darboe. He has allowed for freedom of speech and the press, which is really the only reason I'm willing to disclose all the information now, and one of the many reasons that I had hesitated in talking about where I lived, exactly where I lived previously. Now, there is still a lot up in the air here, and there's still a lot of changes going on. And it's really only thanks to donations on Patreon that we're able to be online and uploading videos at all. I want to once again give a huge thank you to everyone who's donating there right now. Next week, we're going to be back to more philosophical videos, but for now, watch this video and more here at Carneades.org, and stay skeptical, everybody.